Hello friends, this is Elijah Henderson with the Cryptid Studies Institute, bringing you an all-new time-lost tale. And this particular tale is one that I would almost bet the house that you have never had the pleasure of hearing, because this encounter comes from an obscure book published in 1771 that goes by the extensive and wordy name of Travels Through That Part of North America, formerly called Louisiana. This volume was written during an age when a lot of books contained long titles. One of the most famous long-titled books is none other than the almost revered work of Charles Darwin, called The Origin of Species. Of course, that is not the whole title of the book. The book title has been greatly shortened because of elements of implied racism, and that would be frowned upon in modern society. The whole title of the book is actually called On the Origin of Species by Means of Natural Selection, or the Preservation of Favored Races in the Struggle for Life. Darwin's book title is neither here nor there, simply an example of a long-titled book. Like the volume that we are discussing today, Travels Through That Part of North America, formerly called Louisiana. And this book was written by one Monsieur Bossu, who was a captain in the French Marines, and it details Monsieur Bossu's travels through what was at the time the French-owned territory of Louisiana. However, it was prior to the Louisiana Purchase in 1803, so Louisiana was a rather large swath of property. Having said all that, I suppose that it's time to snatch that wad of cotton out of the bottle and get right to the aspirin, so to speak. What looks at first glance to be a very unassuming book on the history and geography of Louisiana contains one of the most unusual and enigmatic cases of historical cryptids that we have discovered to date. And truthfully, we found elements of it to be very shocking. The account details a physical encounter with a flesh-and-blood creature that the Illinois Indians dubbed their personal Manitou. And for those wondering, a Manitou was believed to be a personal spirit, either good or evil, that the Indians would actively look to and engage for success in war, fishing, and hunting, and other aspects of daily life. Jacques Marquette, who founded Michigan's first European settlement, described a Manitou in this manner in 1674. Each person has his own god, which they call their Manitou. This is a serpent, a bird, or other similar thing, of which they have dreamed while sleeping, and in which they place all their confidence for the success of their war, their fishing, and their hunting. But getting back on track, Monsieur Bossu personally witnessed the bizarre, aberrant creature that the Indians deified under the moniker of being a Manitou spirit. I would like to add just a bit more history before we delve in fully. This particular book was written during an era when, for whatever reason, the letter S was replaced by the letter F, so I'll retype the account and transverse the letters to make it easier to read. After some 249 years, Monsieur Bossu's work is considered by scholars as a culturally important book, so for those who are wondering, it is a fairly reliable historical source of information. So, now in his own words, the Manitou. The next day I saw a great crowd in the plain. This assembly was for making a dance in favor of their new Manitou. The priests were dressed in a remarkable manner. Their bodies were covered with a clay in which they had made burlesque drawings, and their faces were painted red, blue, white, yellow, green, and black. The high priest had a bonnet of feathers, like a crown on his head, and a pair of horns of a wild goat to set the feathers off. I own the appearance of this prelate tempted me to laugh, but as these ceremonies are serious, one must take care not to burst out, because it would be reckoned a want of their religion, and an indecent action amongst them. Nor do the Indians ever interrupt the Roman Catholics in the exercise of religion. But what a fight presented itself to my eyes. I saw a living monster considered as a divinity. I was at the door of the temple of this false deity. The master of the ceremonies begged me to go in. I was not yet sufficiently acquainted with their customs, and showed some reluctance. But one of the Indians who accompanied me, perceiving it, told me that if I did not go in, the people would take this as an offense, or at least as a contempt. This discourse determined me, and I went in. This is the picture of their Manitou. His head hung upon his stomach, and looked like a goat's. His ears were like a lynx's ears, with the same kind of hair. His feet, hands, thighs, and legs were in form like those of a man. This false divinity seemed to be about 6 months old. The Indians found it in the woods at the foot of a ridge of mountains called the Mountains of St. Barb, which communicate to the rich mines of Santa Fe in Mexico. The General Assembly was called together on purpose to invoke the protection of this monster against their enemies. I let these poor people know that their Manitou was an evil genius. As a proof of it, I added, that he had permitted the nation of foxes, who were their most cruel enemies, to gain a victory over some of their countrymen, that they ought to quit him as soon as possible and be revenged on him. They answered in this manner, and I don't know how to pronounce that, so I'm not going to. However, it translates to, "We believe thee, thou art in the right." They then voted that he should be burned, and the great priest pronounced his sentence, which, according to the interpreter's explanation, was conceived in these terms: "Monster arisen from the excrements of the evil spirit, to be fatal to our nation, who has wrongfully taken thee for her Manitou. Thou hast paid no regard to the offerings which we have made thee, and hast allowed our enemies, whom thou dost plainly protect, to overcome a party of our countrymen, and to make them slaves. Therefore, our old men assembled in council have unanimously decreed, and with the advice of the chief of the white warriors, that to expiate thy ingratitude towards us, thou shalt be burnt alive." At the end of this sentence, all the assembly said, "As I wish to get this monster, because I could not get that snake I spoke to you of before, I took the following method. I went to the priest, made him a small present, and bid my interpreter tell him that he should persuade his countrymen that if they burnt this evil genius, there might arise one from his ashes which could prove fatal to them, and that I would go on purpose across the great lake in order to deliver them of it. He found my reasons good, and by means of the little present I gave him, he got the sentence changed, and he was ordered to be killed with clubs. As I desired to have the monster without being mutilated, I informed them that they must deliver it to my people, who would strangle it, for if any of their nation killed it, some misfortune or other might happen to him from it. They still approved my reasons, and delivered the animal to me, on condition that I should carry it far from their country. It was accordingly strangled, but having neither spirits of wine nor brandy to preserve it in, I was obliged to get it dissected, in order to be able to bring it to France, to satisfy your curiosity in regards to subjects of natural history. Monsieur Bossu goes on to add an additional detail of information that reads, "The skeleton of this monster, or false divinity, is now in the Natural History Cabinet of Monsieur Dufayel, clerk of the office of the American colonies belonging to the French." That concludes Monsieur Bossu's very detailed encounter with this peculiar beast of history. In other areas of this 1771 book, he states that the Indians never go to war without consulting their Manitou, to whom they attribute all their good or bad luck. If the Manitou has not been favorable to them, they quit him without any ceremony and take another. Elsewhere he states, "The priest, though he was caressed and well fed, was not without uneasiness, fearing that these jokes would end in sacrificing him to the Manitou, or deity of the Indians." Another passage stating, "To return to the Manitou of the Ophasias, I wish to have this pretended relic in my possession, in order to adorn your collection of natural curiosities with it." Keep in mind that a Manitou could have been anything from a serpent to a bird, so more than likely these additional passages were not the same unusual creature we just read about. However, it shows that the Manitou was indeed an Indian custom of the time, and it helps to verify Bossu's statement on the peculiar goat-like Manitou, and it indicates that more than likely he did in fact experience all of the events that he shared. So let's take a moment and analyze the aberrant Manitou monster. His head hung upon his stomach, and looked like a goat's. His ears were like a lynx's ears, with the same kind of hair. His feet, hands, thighs, and legs were in form like those of a man. This false divinity seemed to be about 6 months old. The Indians found it in the woods at the foot of a ridge of mountains called the Mountains of St. Barb, which communicate to the rich mines of Santa Fe in Mexico. Firstly, it is really difficult to pinpoint where this sighting would have taken place, as the Louisiana Territory stretched all the way from New Orleans to up past Montana and into Canada. But more than likely, this took place somewhere in Upper Louisiana, also known as the Illinois country, which in modern times is Missouri, Illinois, and Indiana. Bossu makes the distinction that this creature was an amalgamation of man and animal, consisting of human-like hands, feet, thighs, and legs, bearing a head like a goat that hung on its stomach. In other translations of this event, it specifically mentions that his ears and his cruel eye were like those of a lynx. On first hearing this description, it really puts one in the mindset of another cryptid that has had a very profound impact on this community, and allegedly it has been seen in recent history in certain regions around the United States. For those who are unaware, I'm referencing a goat man. I'd be lying if I said that I was deeply familiar with what a goat man is, but despite that, it has had a widespread influence on those in the cryptid community. I even recall one individual at a cryptid convention brandishing a sign that read, "Have you seen the Popelick monster?" Or in other words, the goat man. We ourselves have had invitations for tours at the alleged Goatman Bridge, or Popelick Trestle, to be exact, in Louisville, Kentucky. But we've yet to make it there yet. Strangely enough, we've been in contact with a woman in Harlan, Kentucky about ongoing encounters with both Sasquatch, dogmen, and even a goatman in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains. We plan to do a Nightmare Nugget on these encounters in the future, and we have dubbed it the Beasts of Bloody Harlan. There have been sightings in Texas, Louisville, Harlan, Kentucky, and even in Maryland. The description of a goatman is very simple, not unlike a dogman or Bigfoot. However, the head is in similitude to a goat's, and the body is like a man's. Interestingly, the goatman is visually very similar to the deity of certain practitioners of the occult, Baphomet, or even the pagan idol of Greek mythology, Pan. Recently, Greg Newkirk and his wife Dana, while filming their Hellier series, made several connections to Pan, and we ourselves are looking into a Pan connection in Pennsylvania. We've been told there's an active cult in Pennsylvania that still worships Pan and carries out rituals to him. While history tells us that the state is named for William Penn, and I believe that, we've been informed that the name Pennsylvania also derives from the Greek and Roman names for Pan, which are Pan and Sylvanus. Whatever the truth may be, we're searching for clues about the supposed cult and their activities. Could there be a supernatural connection to these allegedly very real sightings of these goat-like creatures that are being spied throughout America's forests? I couldn't hazard a guess. However, the hole goes deeper, if you'll spare a moment of time and continue to listen. One Conrad Gesner, who was a linguist, naturalist, and botanist, compiled a staggeringly large compendium of biology. The massive tome was more than 4,000 pages long and included detailed drawings of the natural world. Gesner archived drawings of numerous animals that we know and are very familiar with today. But he also added drawings that appealed to folklore and earlier bestiaries. These images included the famed unicorn of lore and legend. However, in his book, it seemed to be simply a horse with a horn. Other pages included sections on sea serpents that attacked and presumably destroyed ocean-going vessels. But one picture in particular caught my interest, and that was his image of a goat-manish type creature. Complete with what appears to be a large goat-like horn atop its head, and a body covered with a layer of fur. I could never go so far as to claim that this image proves such a creature's existence, as folklore played a part in Gesner's compendium. However, I do find it very interesting, and you never know, perhaps it was based on a biological creature, or even something of a supernatural nature like Pan or Baphomet. This is one possible scenario to explain the identity of the mysterious Manitou monster. However, given the description, we at Cryptid Studies Institute personally feel that the identity of the creature could be nothing more than a juvenile dogman, and I invite you to hear me out as I try to explain why we think that this could be the case. Firstly, I must point out the lack of horns of any kind on the head of the creature. Instead, Monsieur Bossu strictly describes ears in the manner of a lynx, and I have certainly heard descriptions of dogmen bearing similar tufts of hair on the tips of their ears, similar to those a lynx has. Also, a goat's ears hangs downward, whereas a lynx ears point up at an angle, also fitting the description of a dogman. Secondly, Bossu does proclaim the appearance of a goat-like face. However, if you think about it, a creature with the body of a man, but bearing a long muzzle, sounds more like a dogman type creature than anything else, including the addition of hands like a man's and the ears of a lynx, and there are no mentions of cloven hooves as are associated with goatmen. So could this be the true identity of our unusual amalgamated Manitou? I find it extremely interesting that if this was a dogman, or some variation of a dogman, then it was a creature that existed in the flesh. It had a physical body because it was strangled to death, and the skeleton was taken back aboard a ship. It was obviously flesh and blood, otherwise the Indians couldn't have burned it, or clubbed it to death either. Additionally, they found the infant Manitou in the woods at the foothills of a mountain range, so that means there was a mother and a father of the same variety of beast. What was this mysterious Manitou? Was this a dogman? Was it a goatman creature? Unfortunately, we will never know this side of heaven the answer for ourselves. So for now, we can only suppose and speculate as to what it was the Nobel Illinois Indians found in the woods and anointed to be their village's Manitou. If anyone out there can suss out for sure where this mountain range was located, I would surely appreciate it if you could educate me, as I have failed to find it during my research into the subject. As I said, this was prior to the Louisiana Purchase, when a rather large portion of the United States was named the Louisiana Territory. Friends, thank you so much. Please let me know in the comments what you think this was, as I would love your thoughts and theories on the matter. And until next time, I invite you to please like our video and subscribe to our channel, Cryptid Studies Institute. It really helps us out here. And while you're at it, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and let us know if you like this kind of historical content on Dogman, Bigfoot, Goatman, and things we've yet to mention, such as the flying serpents of history, and other historical encounters with the supernatural, such as the stone-throwing devils of New England, the Bell Witch, Wendigos, and other beasties of every type and stripe. But until then, like Shakespeare penned many a year ago, parting is such sweet sorrow. I'm Elijah Henderson, signing off.